Hey, Phil Swift here, and on today's gear review video, we'll be taking a look at the sparring gloves. Now, for this episode, we want to help you decide if you should go for the Hourglass or the long cuffs or the regular cuffs. Basically, this episode is to help you choose your cuffs for the mittens, of course. So let's start off by comparing their design. Now, if you notice, both mittens from the back of the hand to the fingers are basically the same design. Now, the only difference is actually in the lower part of the back of the hand to where the wrist starts. This part is slightly wider than the long cuffs or the regular cuffs. It's just slightly wider by the wrist. Also, where the styro gum foam that protects the lower part of the thumb is a little bit more raised, so you can see the arc there. It's a little bit more raised and curved on the Hourglass versus the styro gum. I know it's kind of hard to see, but it's just slightly more raised, and that leaves a little bit of a gap between your finger and the styro gum, which is, I find, a little bit better protection wise, because it has space to kind of compress. So that is slightly, I find that it is slightly better back of the thumb protection right there. But other than that, the design is relatively the same. Obviously, the cuffs have the longer cuffs and the plastic wrist protection bits. Now, I do find that you're getting better wrist protection overall with the Hourglass because it's styro gum versus plastic, and the styro gum it does absorb impact very well, especially when there's spacing between yourself and the styro gum itself. Not to mention there'll be a gambeson plus a forearm protector in between here and there, right? So this does offer better wrist protection. There is a bigger opening on the wrist here, but honestly, I've never really been hit on the inside of the wrist, though I guess it could happen, but that's a different story. There's with these, I find that with the long cuffs or the regular cuffs, when you bend your arm in a certain way, there is a gap between the plastic, and if you do get hit in between those gaps, it will hurt. So in terms of cuff choices, there are only three options. One is the shortest is the Hourglass, which is this one here, and then there's a regular cuff as well, which is about 12.5 centimeters or 5 inches long. So it pretty much goes up to, I want to say, pretty much right there. And then you have the long extended, which extends pretty much all the way to the start of your elbow. I did mention that the wrist protection isn't as good on any of the regular cuffs or the long cuffs when compared to the Hourglass, but there is a little hack that you can do to kind of make that protection a little bit better. And what I do is I actually, instead of having it fully extended out like this, what I do is I compress it a little bit. So I'll have it sort of like this. And what that does is it overlaps the plastic plates, and that way there's less of a gap in between each plate when you're moving your wrist. So that's how I like to kind of cheat it, I guess. So choosing your cuffs ultimately comes down to what kind of gambeson or jacket you plan to wear your gloves with. Because with the long cuffs, they're great if you have a jacket that has lighter or thinner material around the forearm, which allows your wrist to turn. Otherwise, if your jacket has thick padding or material where the forearm is, there'll be a lot of friction and it won't allow the cuffs to turn with your wrist. So you'll lose out on mobility that way. Whereas the Hourglass, you can pretty much use this with any jacket, along with additional forearm protection. Um, you won't have any problems with wrist mobility or articulation. I do have one issue with this particular design, which is the Gothic design. I should have gotten the regular Hourglass, which wouldn't have this point here. The problem with this point is I'm losing out on a little bit of articulation because the point is essentially hitting my arm, and with a gambeson it's actually even worse. So it'll probably be something like this. And you can compare the two, and you can see that the long cuff, I can actually bend my wrist back further with the long cuffs versus the Hourglass. In terms of bending it forward, they're relatively the same, but to bend it back, it's a little bit better with the longer cuff. But I feel like that's only because of that point there. If I just cut that point off myself, I probably wouldn't have that problem or issue at all. Lastly, I love the fact that the regular mittens with the regular cuff or long cuffs is a little bit sleeker profiled where the wrist is versus the Hourglass. Like if you think about it, the Hourglass is a lot wider in that wrist area, and in a sense, sorry I'm using gamer terms, but this gives you a bigger hitbox near the wrist versus this. That's the only reason why I would like the longer cuff better, and obviously the additional forearm protection all the way to the elbow for $10 more. I mean, that's huge value. Like, so bang for your buck. If you can't afford for additional forearm protector, or if you're just doing drills and you don't want to put on a gambeson, these gloves are sweet for that. Like I said, you're definitely getting your value. Versus the Hourglass. Now, the Hourglass, if I had to choose one of these, I would probably choose the Hourglass, only because I like the fact that I can wear it with any jacket. So because of that flexibility, I would choose the Hourglass over the long cuffs. But like I said, it's just you would probably use this for different reasons. So I hope that helps you figure out which cuff design you want to go with. I mean, the mitten itself is one of the standard styles of gloves that you'll see in longsword HEMA tournaments. Like the sparring glove, regular cuff, or long cuff is probably what you'll mostly see. By far, these are probably the best gloves I own. I do like the fact that they're super light, they're not as bulky, and they have great customer service. Shout out to Barbara. She's been very kind to us with proper shipping times and measurements and everything. She's been great with that. Thank you, Barbara. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this video. I hope this helps. If you have any further questions, feel free to send them to me. Thanks.